Hey folks, welcome to another episode of the TFC Audio Project. On this episode of Shop Talk, Mike and I talk about fitness versus health. We see people in the clinic all the time that are developing health issues trying to pursue their fitness goals, so we really wanted to unpack this topic and help bring these two realms back into alignment. We start by defining fitness and health, what they are, what they aren't. We talk about natural movement, sustainable training, and helping people restore a sense of purpose as to why they train. Really enjoyed the chat and I hope you find it insightful. This episode of the podcast is sponsored by the TFC Foot Nerd program. It's an online-based program we kicked off at the start of 2019 to expand our global community of humans who are spreading the message of health, starting at the feet. The online curriculum is a constantly evolving repository of content and resources that gives you up-to-date knowledge about the body and how to teach others how to improve their health. The program is also an effort to expand our global instructor team and meet the demand for seminars around the world moving forward into the future. For more information on the program, visit thefootcollective.com and click on the Foot Nerd program tab. This episode is also brought to you by the Roasters Pack. Our team at TFC headquarters in Ottawa are big fans of coffee, and this Canadian company provides a unique subscription service that delivers you 3 great coffees to your door each month and gives you the story behind each of the craft roasters that they come from. Check out theroasterspack.com and use the code FOOT at checkout for $7 off your first month of any subscription, which starts at $27 a month, including all shipping and taxes. Last but not least, this episode is also sponsored by our travel partner, Nanook Protective Hard Cases, which keep our electronics safe during travel, and we use them to bring stuff to and from seminars and workshops. They make super high quality cases in Canada, and they stop your electronics from getting smushed on airplanes during travel. So you can check out their awesome stuff at nanook.com, Nanuk.com. That's it for sponsors. So let's dig into this episode. Hope you enjoy.
It's the TFC Audio Project.
It's a collective effort. Help people understand their bodies. Starting at the feet are the gateway for people to see that there's an issue. You know, a foot conversation is always a whole body conversation. Hey folks, Nick and Mike here, back for another episode of Shop Talk. Today's episode, the topic is fitness versus health. And I think putting a versus in there might seem strange to some people, but you know, the way we see it and the problems that we see in clinic, these two things have essentially become mutually exclusive. So I think it's time to talk about realigning fitness and health, and also just unpack and define, you know, what is fitness, what is health, how can people get back to consuming fitness in a way that's actually healthy, and what does that look like and what does that mean? So I think it's a very, it's a big problem that we see. And, the way that we see it is people are trying to consume fitness or trying to be fit, and they end up creating health problems. They end up breaking down their bodies, creating injuries, all that kind of stuff. So that's why the topic came up today. And maybe a good place to start is, why don't we start by defining health? Because there's, and looking into it, there's a lot of different definitions of health. And I think subjectively, person to person, everyone's definition of health is a little bit different. So let's start by defining let's talk about some of the definitions that are out there, and then let's talk about what health actually means to us.
Yeah, so at first glance, one of the first definitions I came across was the state of being free from illness or injury.
What was that, Merriam-Webster definition?
That is, I can't recall where that was from. That was the first one that popped up when I looked for the definition. So that one is...
It's pretty narrow-minded,
I think that is fairly narrow-minded, and that's almost like how we treat health.
Yeah.
Is like, if you're free from disease,
that's
illness,
part of the problem.
Injury, then that's how we would treat it. But then looking a bit deeper, did come across some better definitions of it. I was actually pretty impressed with the World Health Organization definition of it. It's a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being, not merely the absence of disease or infirmity.
That's so much better.
So it is better, because then it's like, hey, it's not just you're not sick. It's how are you? It's that completeness of your state. I
think that's part of the problem with the way we do health today. Like, like for example, you go in and get blood work done, and I don't know what the actual number is to be considered diabetic, but if you're like 0.1 below that number, that threshold, where you're considered to have diabetes, you're fine. It's like Liv went through this the other day. She went to her doctor, and the doctor was basically like, yeah, you don't have a serious enough problem for us to treat it. And she's like, well, where's the line? Where's the line where I'm sick enough to deserve treatment? Why aren't we talking about the fact that, okay, you're 1 unit away from being diabetic. You're not healthy. you're close to being super unhealthy and having a disease. We need to, and the same thing trickles over to fitness. It's like, yeah, just because someone doesn't have knee pain, but they move like, someone might not have knee pain, but if they move like shit, they're still not moving optimally.
Yeah.
So I think not just saying the absence of disease, being in a complete optimal mental, physical, social well-being, that's a way better definition. Good job, World Health Organization.
And another one was the general condition of the body, which is very, very vague. But again, I would say it does make sense. Another one is a person's physical or mental condition. So the condition of the body, what condition it's in. And I think that's where we're going to see there's an overlap in terms of what fitness is defined as well. But I think that's important. And again, that's a whole other podcast topic, I think, is how we can get the healthcare system looking at this definition, because it's great to have a definition of it. But unless the way it's working right now is they're not going by that definition. They're going by the first definition, which is just, hey, we'll take care of you once you're broken, but let's not look at why you're breaking down or maybe getting upstream of these health problems that are happening.
Yeah, like we don't apply that the logic that we apply to health and treating disease or treating people, we would consider it silly to apply it to other things, like a vehicle, for example. You don't wait until your engine has literally blown up and your car's on fire to address an issue, to do some maintenance. You do it so that it doesn't get to that point. Like, you do things preventatively. We treat our teeth preventatively, yet we don't even take that same element to our whole body approach. I agree, health. So the definition of health not just being the absence of disease, but health also being an optimal state, both on all the pillars, right? An optimal state mentally. You have control over your mind. You're in a good mental state. You have a sense of purpose and happiness. In terms of movement, you have a body that actually moves well and isn't breaking down. In terms of sleep, you actually sleep like humans are supposed to sleep. You eat the food humans are supposed to eat, and you have good social relationships that harbor a sense of happiness and community in your life. Like, health is such a big... it definitely is a broad stroke. So the broad definitions are good, but I think the thing we're trying to get to there is that health is not just the absence of a disease, it's optimal function, which can be very subjective, but there are some good metrics.
So looking at fitness, and I think after we define fitness, we can see that fitness and health should overlap and align, ideally, and maybe we can explain why oftentimes they're not necessarily in alignment. They can be, but oftentimes they're not. But it's important to get them more in alignment.
So let's talk about why don't we define fitness? So
fitness is basically, there's three that I'm going to go through. Let's unpack each as we go.
Yeah.
The first one is basically the condition of being physically fit and healthy. And again, that's the most broad one. But they say that it's the condition of being physically fit and healthy, and they included health in that. So that's important there. We don't really need to unpack that one because it's one of those broad ones. Number two is the quality of being suitable to fulfill a particular role or task. Okay. So I think that's better. That's an interesting one.
And so it depends how you define your role or your task. If role and task is just literally being a human surviving during your lifetime on this planet, that's still a very broad definition, but it also gives a bit more direction than just saying the state of being fit or healthy.
I think it's a good one because it's like, what are you, and what tasks are you? And oftentimes you'll hear people say, are you fit for the job, or, you know, so you can look at it very specifically. Are you fit for that specific job? Right. Even as like something physical, like a firefighter, are you fit to be a firefighter?
Yeah.
Are you fit for any other kind of job? Or are you just fit to, like you say, to be like a human in 2019? What does that look like? And
that also might be a bit of a misconception too, because being fit to survive in 2019 has to do more with being able to navigate social media and have than it does to like actually get your food and survive and be able to support your family physically. So it's a weird definition now too.
And fitness, and that's a whole other thing. Like, you're right, fitness means something completely different than it used to. So in 2019, it might mean, but I would still argue that I think it's important to still have that physical fitness, being able to be physically fit for any role or task, because like it or not, we still have these bodies that we have to move around through space. And
for now,
you were giving some examples before. It's like, and we can delve into that deeper later, but if somebody was in need of your help or needed to be carried somewhere, are you fit to be able to actually do these things?
Yeah.
Are you fit to be able to lift the groceries out of your car? Are you fit to be able to do whatever? So there's still a huge physical component of that can either, if you're not fit, you're going to be almost like a hindrance on people.
Yeah.
So whatever task it is, I think just being a human, being fit to be a human is so multidimensional.
What did you say before? Just be good at humaning?
Yeah, being good at humaning is so multidimensional, but I think fitness applies well to that definition. The quality being suitable to fulfill a particular role or task, whatever that might be.
Yeah. And it's good that it can be individualized too, because everyone's sense of what their specific role or task is in life or specific to their family or their job is going to be different. But I think we have to, back to this whole thing, are you fit enough to carry your groceries? Well, what happens when Amazon delivers them for you and you don't have to? It's like we have to just understand that what is no longer required doesn't mean that is no longer healthy.
No, exactly.
And that's going to get more and more relevant. I listened to that Rogan podcast there with the genetic, that gene guy or whatever, the futurist. Oh my,
that was interesting.
That hurt my brain. I got to listen to it again because it made me be extremely aware of the fact that we're on the cusp of something that in 40 years when we look back, this will be a very important time, I think. Anyway, let's get back to that. So those are two definitions.
But I would say, like, just one more thing. Like, it could be anything in terms of, are you fit to be a parent? Are you fit to be a wife or a husband or whatever it might be?
Are you fit to do CrossFit? Are you fit to lift,
and that
compete
might mean,
in a sport?
And that might mean the other things you do. So are you fit to be a parent? Like, how well you sleep, how well you eat, how strong you are. These are all things that help you be a better parent to your kid. Can you play with your kid?
Yeah.
Right? Do you have energy for your kid? All of these other things. So very, very multidimensional. But definition 3 is an organism's ability to survive and reproduce in a particular environment. So that's more of the biological definition of fitness. And that, I think, that is important, and people like to disconnect from the biological component of it, but it's still very, very relevant. And coming from biology backgrounds, I think that one really, really hits home when it comes to fitness. And we might not mean like specifically passing genes on it, but that it still holds true.
I agree. You still have to find a mate and have sex to have a baby. Although that same podcast that I was talking about on Rogan talked about how we probably won't be having sex and make babies in 20 years, which was very weird. But I agree. That is still on the radar of relevance, and it's still important. Surviving
and thriving, and then reproducing. But even if we cut out the reproducing, the surviving and thriving in this environment, that's really the definition of fitness when it comes to every other animal. So if you look at basically, we're special, and you've already been hinting at that. We like to think we're special, but we actually are. If you look at every other animal in the animal kingdom, what is fitness to every other animal? So fitness is basically doing the species-specific things that animal needs to do in order to survive, in order to thrive, and in order to reproduce.
Yeah.
They need to fight off things that are trying to kill them. They need to hunt for food or get their food or obtain food. And then they need to be good at it or better at it than other people so they can get ahead.
Can you win at the game of natural selection? That's really what the traditional biological Darwinian sense of fitness is. And like we said, it's like, a tiger has no choice but to be able to hunt for its food, to be able to understand how to collect enough food and protect its young so that its young can survive and become adult tigers.
And it needs to be able to do the stuff required in order to do that. So it needs to run fast. It needs to be strong. It needs to fight. So it needs to have, and these can all be broken down into like movements that species does.
Yep. So
it needs to be good at those species-specific movements and tasks.
It needs to be able to teach its offspring how to do those same things so that they can survive. That's very important.
So I think if you relate that back to humans, fitness has been almost disconnected from our survival to some extent.
That's a great way of putting it.
But I still think it's connected very heavily to our health, well-being, and has heavy biological implications as well.
Well, I think, we've disconnected from
our absolute survival, I would say.
So survival is now disconnected from fitness, but people don't realize that in order to thrive and be happy and be in optimal state, your fitness really has a big impact on your ability to thrive as a human. Not survive, but thrive. And that's really the more important thing, right? Like we talked about how health is not just the absence of disease, it's being in this optimal state, which I think is sometimes a fuzzy word for a lot of people, but it means you feel good. You feel you have good amounts of energy. Your body feels good. You move well without pain. You have a sense of purpose and happiness in your life. Like these are sometimes very general words to throw out there, but that's really what it means. It's like, are you enjoying the life you're living?
And I think we get jaded living in North America too, because if you look at other areas in the world, fitness still means like you better be able to carry a bunch of shit every day. You better be able to hunt still. So I think it really, we forget about that, is that fitness still has a real physical component to it. And even somebody who has like a physical job, it's like if you're better at that job, that can procure you more resources or money. You can move up the ladder. Like being physical does still have implications, and being fit does still have implications for survival, almost in like an indirect way as well. But it can also make you more attractive to the opposite sex and things like that too. So being able to handle yourself and being capable and being strong and being what others would consider fit. So.
So why don't we talk about, now let's talk about what fitness isn't.
Yeah.
And let's talk about the common conceptions of what people think fitness is, right? Like you brought up a really good one before. What fitness isn't, it's not a look.
Yeah, and I think...
Right? At least in what we consider to be an optimal definition
it's not necessarily a look, but it can be. The look can
You're right.
equate
A look
to
is a byproduct of optimal fitness.
Yeah,
but it is not the goal.
People think it's people think it's just simply a look, and that's one of the things that it isn't necessarily just that. A perfect example is like, let's say there's not to shit on bodybuilders, but some bodybuilders would look fit to the average person who looks at them like, oh, that person's like shredded in competition form. They're really fit. But then you might look a little bit deeper under the hood and be like,
they might be terribly unhealthy.
This person might be terribly unhealthy. Physically, oftentimes nursing injuries, not being able to do other movements, running, climbing, jumping, all these other things that you might consider fitness as, but also things like the diets that they put themselves through, like I said, mentally, emotionally. So all these other things you might come up and be like, well, actually, that person, if we define fitness this way, is not fit at all, right? They just look fit. But I think it's very deceiving a lot of times because we look at somebody and be like, that person's fit because they look that way.
Yeah. Yeah, like if you're jacked to the ceiling and you look insane in terms of aesthetically, but you couldn't swim to rescue someone that's drowning, you couldn't climb a cliff to save yourself or to save someone else, like what definition of fitness are you using? Because that means that person might not be fit according to certain definitions. And the other one that you said, so number one, it's a look. Number two, it's people doing stuff, right? Yeah. Like you gave the analogy of that marathon runner.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And like people think that because you do certain activities that you're fit. So like, you're an Ironman or marathoner. Like, okay, you do that. So like Jenny has done 5 Ironmans. She's super fit. Maybe, but maybe not. So they're not necessarily the same thing.
Yeah, like maybe Jenny has 0 cartilage in both her knees and walks around in pain every day.
Maybe Jenny is not. Yeah, maybe Jenny is not happy. Maybe Jenny can only do one thing, which is run, but can't handle any loads. Can't do a squat. Couldn't do other things like climb. Like it's the whole thing, right? So I think that, and like you say, maybe Jenny's in pain. Maybe Jenny's in a huge amount of pain, and is going to have to get her knees replaced prematurely, but maybe she isn't. And we're just saying that like that's often what people think of. It's just like a quick jump to conclusion. That person does marathons, they're fit. This person looks jacked, they're fit. Yeah, but maybe not.
Yeah.
So
and they're deceiving, and it's back to redefining fitness. Like reading that book Natural Movement by Erwan LaCour, which I highly recommend it. It was I'm not even done it yet, but it has been a very powerful book in just reshaping how I think of fitness and training and sustainable training. One thing he says that I think is really powerful is he says, train to never be useless and also to be useful. Train so that you're not the person that needs to be helped on a hike because your knee hurts or because you don't have the capacity to breathe, and so you get gassed out and people have to wait for you. So don't be the person that falls to the ground and needs to be helped up. Don't be useless. And also train to be the person that's useful, right? If someone needs help, if you're on a hike, someone has a fluke accident, they break their ankle, be the person that's able to be useful and help that person down the hill. Be able to carry that person. Be able to lift things or help carry that person. So be useful. Be able to go swim and help someone that's drowning, right? Be useful to help others and never be useless. That to me that is a big element of fitness, I think, right? Yeah. Are you fit to be to be good at humaning. And humaning
Yeah.
means helping others and also just surviving without being a burden on others.
So that's more of that's more what fitness should be, and
Yeah.
and that's still like from more of a physical standpoint. But I think that's huge, like the ability to move yourself through the environment safely,
Yeah.
move yourself through your environment dynamically, handle yourself, help people, be of use, handle some load, carry stuff. So all the
Be
things
able to
that
defend yourself.
defend yourself if needed. I think that's a big one that we like to, and that's something I want to explore a bit more too. Is that,
Like personally?
yeah, just like
Me too. I want to try some sort like I find jiu-jitsu very compelling, and I realize that I keep saying that, but until you just say I'm going to prioritize it, screw it. I need to just do it. Like James, TFC Australia is starting to get into jiu-jitsu now, and it seems so interesting, and it seems so damn relevant, right?
Oh, for sure.
If someone is trying to kill you or trying to hurt you or hurting someone you love, can you disarm them and disable them through grappling and through submitting them in a way that is low impact and extremely tactical? It is so practical. Like
sure.
that story that Rogan said of some guy, he was with Tate Fletcher, some guy in Vegas in the elevators being an idiot, and got to the point where Tate's like, yeah, I just choked him out and left him in the elevator.
He leg kicked him and then choked him out.
Yeah.
But I think, and it might not show up as much as it used to, but I think that is one element of it too. Is just like, do you have the capability to defend yourself?
Yeah.
Um,
And that helps with people that are able to, if you know you can strangle someone to death, not that you ever would, but if you had to, you could. It gives you a sense of confidence and like a different mindset when you're moving through the environment.
well, that's
I
huge.
really think it's calming. I can, you go into an environment that might be intimidating and you know that you can hold your own. You don't have as much anxiety. Like, you're relaxed.
Well, that concept right there that you just said, that confidence, I think it can be extrapolated out to other things as well. So,
Well,
so
let's talk
being
about
able,
movement freedom, like you said.
exactly. So
That's a beautiful term.
That's what like physical freedom, I think, is a big, not only the ability to defend yourself, but the ability to do whatever, whenever. So having both the competence, which is the first thing, you need the competence before you can develop the confidence. So if you have both of those things, the movement competence, like, hey, there's a thing there that my friend needs help lifting. I know I can lift that. I know my body can do that, number one, and I'm confident that I can do that. Or, hey, somebody needs help over here. I know I can do that. Or I want to water ski on the weekend. I know I can do that. My body, I've kind of stress tested my body in all these different ways before that. I know my body is physically able to do that.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of people get away from this physical freedom, and they don't have, number one, the competence, number two, the confidence, and they're very unsure of what their bodies are or aren't able to do. They're like, I don't know if my
it's
thing
unclear.
is able to. It's very unclear because they've never kind of tried it and trialed it before, so they don't know.
And
so
sometimes
think
I
that's
feel
huge.
like that can be a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? Someone's like, ooh, I don't know if I can water ski. I haven't done it in a while. I don't know if my body can handle it. And they go and they're very anxious and they're very stiff and rigid. And if you're stiff and rigid and yet you have to do something like take off on water skis where you have to move very flowingly, like, it's pretty easy to tear a hamstring if you're rigid like a 2x4 trying to get up on water skis. So sometimes it's like not knowing whether or not you're competent and definitely being non-confident in something, but trying it just because other people are doing it, or you feel silly or judged for not doing it, and then getting injured, it feeds into the same thing. So next time you're not going to do it.
Yeah.
If you were confident and you had, you knew that this wasn't dangerous per se because like you said, you stress tested your body, then oftentimes it leads the other way.
Yeah. So like putting your body in all these different, almost expanding the repertoire of what your body can do would give you this sense of confidence. And that's where maybe we're going to talk about how maybe, it's not just all about the gym, but the gym is also a good place to maybe practice these things. Like, hey, if you can deadlift a weight off the floor in the gym, and you will be the person that understands that, if you need to help your friend lift a couch on the weekend, you're like, oh, I don't know, I don't want to throw my back out or things like that. It's like, no, I know I can do that, obviously. So there's a time and place for the gym where we can put our body and almost simulate these things that might show up in our life. But I think the biggest thing is, what is the carryover to our life? And that's where it becomes the most relevant, as opposed to just doing it for the sake of doing it in the gym or to look a certain way.
Yeah.
So
I agree. And it's back to that concept of fitness. Like, are you training just to be good at training? Mm-hmm. Are you lifting weights just to be good at lifting weights? Maybe that's your sport. So you're training for a purpose. You're improving your fitness for a purpose of lifting weights in a competition. I think under that, if you look at training in layers, the superficial layer, the top of the pyramid might be trying to be fit for a certain sport or a certain activity, but you should never just throw out the fact that you should still be enough of a generalist to have movement freedom as a human, right? Like, if you're a professional athlete and you make your money to pay your bills based on being good at a sport, fine. Maybe that takes a much bigger priority. But I think people discount the fact that if you're generally fit as a human, you will improve your specific sports performance and you will increase your ability to sustainably train.
Yeah.
Right? Like, don't pigeonhole yourself and narrow your scope of movement freedom just for the sake of eking out 1% more performance here at the sacrifice of huge amounts of injury risk and inefficiencies in the long term. So,
classic example of
just gotta think about it.
Sports that train in like one plane, like a sagittal plane dominance, like lifting or things like that. It's like you're gonna benefit yourself by training out of that in other planes too, like the transverse rotational plane. It's not gonna plane. It's not gonna hurt you. It's gonna help you because it's gonna help you not get injured as much. It's also gonna help you specifically in that.
People don't see that though. People don't see like we did that running workshop recently, and there are a couple of runners that you had mentioned are lifters or maybe Olympic weightlifters. Don't spend a lot of time working on rotational competency, and we're having issues with running. And I think a lot of people look at, okay, I'm a lifter, I want to get good at lifting weights. They see practicing a movement or working on a movement like running as an opportunity cost, right? The time I spend working on running or these movements that aren't directly related to my sport are going to take away from the training time I'm able to put in for my sport. What they don't realize is that those things actually make you better at your sport. I'm not saying only train running if you're a weightlifter, but maybe a bit of running can do you a huge amount of benefit in terms of your body long term, but also in terms of your sport.
You can almost patch those holes up or holes in the game that you might have.
Yeah, get out of your bubble and make sure that you have a body that is fit for life, not just for sport. Because that long term, like, I really think that a lot of professional athletes would have benefited greatly from having a more balanced definition of fitness and focusing on that, not just sports specific. Because when they're retired from their sport, like, look at Ronnie Coleman, right? Like, he was the best in the world. Now he can't walk without crutches.
He's only in his 50s.
Yeah, it's crazy, and it's sad to see. But I really think that he could have. It's always hindsight's always 20/20. Could he have gotten to where he got to in a different way that would have left him in better shape afterwards? I think he probably could have.
Now that's an extreme.
Who knows?
That's an extreme sport too, bodybuilding.
Yeah, it is.
You're right. I think you can apply that to other sports as well, and maybe if you did a little bit of groundwork, could it make your general life better than without compromising your abilities in that sport? Yeah, that's the key.
And also let you just live a better life after sport with a body that actually works and isn't loaded with deep rooted imbalances from this small kind of subset of movements you did at a high level your whole life. So yeah, the physical freedom concept is a very big one. Being able to perform any task or have any task available to you and be able to approach it with competence and confidence. And like you said, those two are very intertwined, right?
And maybe that you can't do that thing because you've stress tested your body. So maybe you're like, that's past. I think just knowing what your physical capacities are is huge because you truly know, not because you're just guessing. If you see somebody's like, hey, help me deadlift this car over, you're like, well, that's 1,000 pounds. I know me and you combined, we're not gonna be able to deadlift that. Yeah. So I know that. So being realistic and truly realistic about what you can and can't do.
Yeah, being honest with yourself. And then I think it's very easy to overestimate what you're capable of, or on the other side, for some people, underestimate what you're capable of. Right? This and the only way to find out is to stress test.
By doing it.
Exactly. And test yourself and stress this. And maybe there's something where it's like, oh, climb this boulder up this wall, and it's a very big, and you're like, I've done some bouldering time. I'm not ready for that yet. But now I know that that's within my grasp. I'm going to train up and stress test myself so that next time we come here, I can do it. Or I can at least feel confident enough to try it safely within my realm of competence.
Yeah. And they stress test vehicles. We have these bodies. I think we just need to put them to the test. And that's what kids do when they're developing. They just, they move, they play. Play is all about figuring out what you can do and how you can handle yourself. And I like how Alex from in Costa Rica, Alex Herrera, he was talking about play is not this silly fun thing that play is often very serious, and it's like, let's get to the point of, let's see what my body can do, let's see what your body can do.
Yeah.
Let's put them up together, either physically, like as like a, wrestling or things like that, or let's just compete against each other in this physical task that we're choosing today.
Yeah.
And we'll call it play because it's not true. It is, there's an element of competition, but it's not like fierce competition, or there's no stakes necessarily on it.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's so important in terms of people's training. We've disconnected from play as well. And I think, like you said, when you say, oh, we need to introduce more play into your training, people are like, I'm a serious human. I'm training to be strong. I don't want to play. I don't want to play games. It's like, well, did you know that this is play? And you introduce a drill, you show them beam work and say, this is why beam work can benefit you, or some sort of balance practice can benefit you, because it'll actually let you squat and deadlift more and be less prone to injuries. Oh, okay. All of a sudden play is something that actually is on the radar. And they're like, okay, I'm open-minded to trying it. So I think just so many terms start to go down the wrong path and get so deeply ingrained. Fitness is one of them. Health is one of them, although the awareness is improving now. Play is definitely one of them.
Play is almost like an experiment, I would say.
Yeah.
It's like saying, can my body do that? And then the process of seeing if your body can do that is the play. So,
and it's like, there's one asterisk with play where it's like, it's enjoyable.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's hard to find out why it's enjoyable, but grabbing rocks on a street and trying to hit a target, that's play. But it's targeted play with a movement that humans are adapted and designed to do, and reconnecting with something you haven't done in a long time. Like the other day, I was walking by, I was just walking around, and there was a kid actually, it was at Lustville. Remember that kid was throwing stuff?
Oh, yeah.
The kid wasn't throwing it because he got a prize or because he got something for doing it. He just loved throwing shit. Just throwing rocks left, right, and center. He would pick something and then try and throw it as hard as he could. And like, he was dialing in his ability to control his shoulder to launch an object.
Yeah.
No one told that. He didn't look at it from that perspective. If you asked him why he's throwing stuff, he's just like, I don't know. I just feel like throwing stuff.
But I think it's like deeply biological too.
Yeah.
I think that's remnants of the biology, although we've got disconnected from aspects of play.
That's
other
what I was
species,
trying to say. We're disconnected from that now.
Other species, you will see them wrestling, like cats or other like dogs playing. You'll see your dogs playing with each other, and it almost is. Sometimes it almost, as you mentioned before, it almost looks like it's to the point where it's borderline serious.
Yeah,
They're
where
almost,
you don't know if you're supposed to step in or not.
But you know that there's still that element of play, and it's almost like, let's just push each other's limits here. Let's see. And I think if you look at it from that standpoint, let's see what our bodies can do here in this. We've agreed upon the fact that this is play, so it means it's not to the death, meaning that we're stress testing each other so that when it might be for the death, then I know I can do it. And that might be other things. Let's play here throwing stuff so that when I go do other stuff, it's better. Or you can incorporate that same logic to other things. But I think it comes down to, let's see what my body can do so that when I might need it in the future, I know I've been able to do stuff like this before, so I can carry over these skills or these competencies to other things when needed.
Yep, I agree. Next thing let's talk about, because this is a big one, is sedentary exercisers. And what we mean by that are people that are living a sedentary lifestyle is defined as 6 or more hours a day spent in the sitting position. It's very easy to accumulate 6 hours. Do some sort of journal and calculate how much time for 7 days straight. Calculate what the average amount of time you spend per day sitting in a chair is. You will be astounded as to how much sitting you do without even realizing you're doing sitting, because so much of our life almost subconsciously revolves around sitting, right? We just do it. Chairs are always available. They're sometimes the only option that you have, right? If you sit in a car, if you're in a car, rather, you're automatically sitting. And so if you sit for 6 or more hours a day, the term sedentary exercises are people that live a sedentary lifestyle and yet attempt to consume some sort of daily or regular dose of fitness. And I think this is where this whole problem that started this conversation of people creating health problems trying to be fit really comes from, right? Because they're putting their body in a position that requires very, very little, that requires almost no movement. It's in a position that creates imbalances based on the position your joints are in, which over time, consumed for long periods, can limit the amount of movement you have at those joints. And then when you try and layer on load or repetitions or repeats on top of dysfunctional joints and movement patterns, that's why a lot of people break down. Like, what percentage of patients that you see in clinic would you guess exercise, quote unquote, on a regular basis?
It's a lot of them try to, but it might look different for different people. I think we forget that a lot of what people think of as exercising and also like using machines and things like that, where
Yeah.
they're actually a lot of times sitting once again. So sitting and doing things on machines. So I would say that a lot of people do try to incorporate some forms of exercise. It's different for everybody.
What I'm trying to get at there is just a lot of the people that are breaking down are actually people that, people assume, oh, their body doesn't work because they don't exercise. When in reality, it's like most of the people whose bodies are stopping to work or giving them problems, exercise. And exercise is not bad, but it can be bad if you don't know how to move, and yet you do those movements repetitively. This is something
it depends what you're doing.
This always generates big time controversy on social media, and I've had to like even take down a couple posts and reword them because people just misinterpret it. It's like exercise is good for humans, but exercise can be bad for you, right? And having sore knees doesn't mean you just have to exercise more. It means you have to exercise and move better.
It depends what you're doing, because
It's a big point of confusion.
Exercise could mean going on a stationary bike. So yeah, and that may or may not be doing you. It can be doing you like one form of service in terms of maybe some cardiovascular fitness and things like that. In terms of like being fit from a movement perspective or being able to handle yourself in the whole plethora of things you might have to encounter, probably not doing you much being like, on an exercise bike 3 days a week or whatever. Mm-hmm. It's not necessarily bad.
No,
that's the thing. It's like, what are you doing? And then how are you doing it? And then is that fitting in the grand scheme of like making you fitter or not, the way we would typically define it? And I think a lot of people are doing I think the big thing is people are doing their chunk of exercise, and it's not getting them closer to being what we would consider fit.
Yeah.
I think that's the big thing. So like,
and like, what is the net effect? I think that's a big thing. We talked about this in the nutrition podcast, which I think in the next month we should do another one because I got some interesting stuff that I've learned since the last one. But this whole net effect concept, you do something now, what is the global effect that it has? So let's take an example. Jim likes to run. Jim goes on a 10K run. He goes for his run. He gets a really, really good mental feeling, right? He's focused. He's doing something he loves. He gets a runner's high. So he gets a really high positive net effect in terms of mentally. His cardio system gets worked. So he has a good effect there. But he also creates knee and ankle pain that lasts him 2 days after his run because he's running with poor technique and he's coming from sitting for 8 hours a day and then going on his run. So what is the net effect, right? Like the plus of good mental state, the plus of good cardio, the negative of his body has gotten further down the road of kind of breaking down. It's like that might not be as big of a positive effect as Jim thinks. And then the question is there a way to turn that into a bigger net positive? Mm-hmm. Yes, there is. He can consume something. He could potentially consume a different movement to give him a good mental state of having moved and open up and target his cardio system. But can he pick a movement that doesn't result in knee and ankle pain? Or can Jim understand how to run better and clean up his running technique and then be able to do that without the negative, right? Like we need to look at these overall net effects as to whether or not the movement that you're doing at that point in time is good for you or not good for you.
I think that we need to keep that dynamic, the fact that this is all dynamic in mind, because Jim could work on, maybe it's because he's missing a lot of mobility and he's stiff. He can, like you say, he can work on all these things so he can make that more sustainable. But I think a lot of research and a lot of just people think it's just like a snapshot. It's like, is running bad for your knees? It's like, well, it might be or it might not be.
It's not
Everything
that simple.
depends. Everything is very nuanced. So your exercise routine might be it could be good for you. It could be also have more of a net negative effect on you too.
Mm-hmm.
And
that's the problem.
And people be like, oh, don't shit on people who are getting it. It's like, well, okay, let's just be realists here. If you're going to do something and you end up in more pain and injury than when you started, maybe it's not the best thing for you to be doing, or maybe you should just look a bit deeper and try to change to make it something that you can make it. So
we're on the same team. We're trying to help people be fit and be healthy and be optimal, right? Like telling someone they shouldn't be running is not because we want to shit on them and just saying don't run. It's like, is this costing you your health? We're here to tell you the things that you need to know, not the stuff that you want to hear.
Or is it a dose? Is it simply a dose thing too? Because a lot of people, it's just simply dose. So they're just doing maybe too much of that thing.
Yeah.
So maybe running is the thing of choice. So you're like, how much are you running? Okay, maybe we should talk about just dosing it slightly differently. Oh, cool. We've just unloaded things a little bit. We've allowed for more recovery and adaptation between your runs.
And now
cool,
you don't
we're
have
good
pain.
now. So yeah. So I
And
think
saying it depends doesn't mean there's no answer. It just means more has to be found out about that specific person in order to understand what guidance to give them so that they can get on the right track. People fix themselves. You cannot fix people, but people often need guidance because right now, not only is the medical system the way it is right now, including the rehab side and the medical side, not only is it not helping people, it's actually oftentimes leading them down the wrong path. Right,
Yeah.
Jim is not being told he has to find a movement that doesn't create pain, or not being told he has to work on how he's running so he can run without pain. He's being told, don't run and take these little pills to help get rid of some of the pain. These are both very poor solutions to that problem that Jim has. And we just have to, people are more than capable of understanding these basic things, right? Like this is not, they don't need to come to some rehab or medical wizard to tell them the basic shit that humans need to know to take care of themselves. Self-care, self-maintenance, basic movement skills, and literacy. These are not beyond the reach of people, but they're not being given to them through the traditional medical system.
And I would say, and this might sound controversial too, but if you're getting hurt doing the things that if you're getting hurt trying to be fit, it's
not controversial at all. It's logic.
It's like, okay, well, if we go by the definition of fitness being capable and functional and all of these things, well, then getting injured trying to be that, well, maybe just need some re-examining in terms of how you're doing it. And it might not be, maybe it's, you just need to, in a long-term perspective, re-examining things. So maybe we can talk about just a few ways of how do we look at maybe some ideas of how do we build fitness. Maybe different ways of looking at how to do that.
Well, just one tiny side note. I think a lot of people also, if they're overweight and they're like, I want to get fit, they think going to the gym is the answer. Yeah. And this is a big, I think this is a very big misconception. Like losing weight and shedding fat and changing your body composition has way less to do with being in the gym and way more to do with what you shove into your mouth. That needs to be the point of that is the low-hanging fruit. That is the first point of education in the triage of going from overweight to losing weight and losing fat. So that's one thing. It's a misconception of fitness. Being fit, oftentimes people think means being shredded or not being overweight, and that going from overweight to that state requires you to go into the gym. This is not true.
And I do think that like fitness, I think having a healthy body weight would be one of the keys to fitness
For
too.
sure.
Because if we look at like
health and big time health.
mortality, that would be something to consider. But you're right, it's not simply trying to, I think people's perception of getting fit, whereas it's like the look and the things you're doing. So it's like, I'm the runner and I want to look that way. Maybe it's like, okay, we need to actually look at diet, we need to look at sleep, and we need to look at general movement outside of the gym sessions too. So if you are moving more, standing more, doing different things throughout the day, setting up your environment differently, that is going to help you just as much. I would argue you can burn just as much calories getting your lifestyle slightly more movement based as that hour in the gym. Just if your workstation set up a bit differently, the same amount of calories over that 7-8 hour period versus the 1 hour or more,
sure.
or probably more.
And it's like, so I heard Kelly Stride on a podcast recently. I think it was one of his older podcasts, but he basically said that based on his wife Juliet's body dimension, if she stood instead of sat at her desk all year long, she does almost 2 marathons a month in terms of the calorie expenditure that she's doing. So without ever running, she's basically running 20 marathons a year by just standing. This is very powerful because you're burning a lot of energy. You're avoiding spending time in these imbalanced positions. And those are the kind of changes where it's like, okay, you want to burn more calories, you want to burn more energy to get rid of some of your fat. How about we get you running 2 marathons a month, but we do it without ever running? That's an easy one to start to really hack away at and work towards.
Exactly.
So, okay, so let's talk about, like you said before, different ways of building fitness, right? Like if someone comes to you and says, Mike, I'm having problems with my body. I'm really not liking the training I'm doing. I have to drag my ass to the gym. It's not enjoyable. I actually feel poor effects afterwards. How can I be fit? This is what I think of as fit. How can I be fit? What would you recommend I do? What do you tell someone?
Well, I mean, assuming that it needs to fit within the confines of what are they willing to do, what do they have access to, what's their environment look like.
I want to spend an hour a day. I have a gym membership. I also have stuff at home, and I'm open to doing stuff on weekends where I can go and do things that are not in the gym and not in home. So 1 hour a day, every day, I can do it at home. I can do it in the gym, and then I can do stuff on weekends. One
of the big things I think would be like the first step that would guide this whole process is let's get you connecting with your physical machine, and being very let's from this point on, let's be mindful of like what we're doing, like very mindful.
Yep.
So whenever we're doing any given activity, wherever it happens to be, whether it's out in nature or whether it's at the gym or whatever, connect with your body. What am I doing? Get into it. Be aware of it. How does it feel when I lift this way? Oh, how does it feel when I lift that way? Can I move my body this way? So that's really the first step that helps guide you through all of this. And some of that might, a helpful coach or clinician or trainer can help guide you through some of that as well.
And I would argue the optimal one is all three of those: coach, trainer, and clinician. We can be all three. Physical therapists and other professionals can be all three, and they should, because you know what? If you see one person for your fitness and one person for your rehab, and they're speaking different languages, they can be counteracting each other. So yeah, I mean, it starts with just understanding. And if you go and experiment in the gym, or you go and experiment by hanging on something, and you get this weird feeling that you don't quite understand, that is those are pieces of data that you can go back to your clinician or back to your coach and say, listen, I did this and this is what I felt, and this is what I felt 2 hours after. I did this and it felt really good. Can you help me understand why that is and how I can kind of use that feedback positively to go in the right direction? And I think it's very powerful, right? Like for your patients, you are a resource. You're a resource that is used as needed. Yeah. You're not someone that they're dependent on in order to feel good or feel healthy. They're someone that they're confident in knowing that if they have a problem or they have a question, right? Not an injury, but they're like, I tried this. It felt a bit sketchy and I didn't expect it to. I'm going to make an appointment with Mike and I'm going to tell him about it. And then you help them understand it instead of just tell them what to do. That is such a paradigm shift in the way that we do physical therapy, or the way that we just help people discover health. And I think that's important. This is not taught in school. That's part of the problem.
Oh, exactly.
So sorry to get off on a tangent.
That's okay. So like, connecting with the machine, after that comes discovering your current capabilities. So, and those current capabilities might be I think the big thing is like task oriented training. So the task might be to lift object A off the floor. The task might be to carry these two heavy weights, right? So setting yourself up with these movement tasks or physical tasks, and then just determining what is your body capable of doing. That's really important in this process. So it's, you might find some big holes in your game. Like I can't even squat down to pick something up, or I can't even bend down to pick up that thing off the ground because my back hurt. Okay, so there's problems. So there's the holes in my game. Let's start to patch up these holes to kind of get a more complete picture of what fitness is for you.
And the clinic is basically a stress testing lab where, in a controlled environment under the supervision of someone that knows what they're doing, you can test your body in a safe way that doesn't have this massive risk of injury, and see where you're at and discover those holes, right? People don't know how to screen themselves or test themselves in terms of finding holes in their game or holes in their movement patterns or their ability to be, to express fitness. That's where a health professional should come into play. Now, if you go into the clinic and all they do is touch around the area that you have pain, there is no real therapy going on there. There's no stress testing. There's no screening. There's no seeing where you're at and explaining how we can work to improve and patch up those holes. Because those holes are where the injuries happen. They're chinks in your armor that make you vulnerable to injury.
And I would argue that you're down that same path, is that physical therapists need to think of themselves as working on somebody's fitness, if we define fitness as what we're currently defining it as.
Yeah,
because
that's so true.
We think of, okay, well, these people deal with fitness. We don't. We deal with like injuries, but fitness is everything. So it's how are you, it's everything we just talked about. So I think that we need to look at helping people be more fit for any given task at hand, for their thriving and survival in the environment, to be able to maneuver themselves through the environment, lift things, carry things. So I think that giving people tasks in an environment, or setting people or giving yourself tasks in the gym or environment that you have, and stress testing them, incorporating some of this play. But I think the other component of helping your own fitness out is putting yourself in front of natural tasks. So if you go out, things like incorporating one hike in per week if you have the means to do so, or a couple per month or something like this. So bringing yourself into nature and maneuvering over different like rocks, paths, trees, all of this kind of thing. So if you can put yourself in the natural environment, it's really going to stress test multiple aspects of this so-called fitness.
With a bunch of other benefits that you won't even be able
sure.
to tangibly put your finger on.
That's the thing. So moving yourself through the natural environment, unfortunately, it's hard for some people to find natural environment these days because of the way that we've built everything up. So if you're living like downtown New York City, it's like, okay, fortunately you might need to travel like 2 hours to get out of that. But
they have parks. And remember we were
yes.
trying to go to, we had a seminar in like New Jersey, which we had an issue and we had to reschedule it. But they have in Brooklyn and stuff like that. Like you can see people trying to reincorporate natural environments in urban dominated areas, right?
I think that's key.
And like your brother, so Mike's brother is a landscape architect, and I want to do a podcast with him, health conversations episode with him about engineering movement rich environments, engineered landscapes that mimic the natural environment, but that can be, you know, at a fairly low cost and fairly simply be put into an urban environment to mimic what people have available to them in the natural environment.
That's huge.
And I'm super, because I know he's into that. He's a mover. Like he's a landscape architect, but he comes to us to perform better every year because he's a mover and he loves movement. And so anyway, that's going to be an episode coming up. But
that's
right.
actually that's huge. So if we could get aspects of this natural movement without having to actually go into nature. I mean, nothing was going to replace if you have access to nature, go out into nature.
Yes.
But for people who it's not, because you could get little snacks of it. If you have
That's what I was going to say.
If you have an area that's down the street from you and you can go and like climb a few things, jump over a few things, balance on a few things, do a few things that might show up in nature, cool. You've just got a little snack of it, and that might be like 20, 30 minutes. So you don't have to drive and make a half a day out of it.
And you've built robustness so that when you do go into nature, you have a higher level of confidence, right? You've trained your ability to navigate the natural environment by working in kind of like an artificial, but still an environment that's trying to mimic the natural environment.
I think we need more task-oriented training like that. I think a big part of it is that, and like I said, the task might be very simple, like a deadlift might be a task for you, but other tasks might be climb that thing, jump over that thing, run away from that thing. So that might be, I think that's a big part of it. And then
task-oriented stuff. So there was, when we were in Australia, there was a playground near the outdoor playground, or I say playground, but it was like an outdoor adult fitness installation near the people that we were staying with. And one of my favorite things to do was go from one end of the structure to the other without touching the ground. Basically pretending like the ground is lava and go from one end to the other, don't touch the ground. And every single day I did it differently, because you're allowed to have full creative expression of how do I get from point A to point B in whatever way I need to or whatever way I can without touching the ground.
So you were doing a lot of human stuff during that. You were balancing, probably
hanging, crawling,
jumping a little bit from thing to thing, leaping. Just
and that's
looking
powerful.
at the environment and doing human stuff to navigate the environment. Moving like a human.
And towards the end, I'm forcing myself to explore these ways of navigating through that structure in ways that like push me, right? It's like, okay, instead of going the easy route, I'm going to take this route. This is really challenging. I might fall, but I only fall like 3 feet and I'm fine. So like engineering your own struggle by doing things and seeing how you can make them more difficult with the same environment. It's like a challenge. How can I create a bigger movement challenge or a bigger dose of physical challenge going through the same environment? And I think that's powerful.
Oh, for sure. I think that
because kids do it.
Exactly.
Adults don't.
I think the big thing is too, if you're unidimensional in your training, to make you more fit, just look outside the box a little bit. I think especially if you're specializing, back to that concept, this is what I'll add is just maybe look at if you're in the gym 7 days a week, replace one of those with going on a hike. If you're a runner who runs 7 days a week, maybe go to a climbing gym once a week. So I think that there's power to be had in exploring different options to make you more of a well-rounded, more fit, in quotes, person. So by just experimenting.
And I think in the gym, one thing that I've kind of noticed just based on what people are saying in term and how their movement patterns are after going into the gym is that the gym, going into some sort of fitness environment, right? The classic gym, it should be a place where you go to help restore balance, right? Restore balance in joints, restore balance in muscles. And yet it's a place where a lot of people go to develop imbalances or to feed into an imbalance. And I'll give you an example. Joe goes into the gym. He has stiff hips and stiff ankles because he sits and wears dress shoes. So he's got limitations. He goes and grabs a barbell and does loaded squats. And he pushes himself. Joe used to play hockey. He used to be an athlete. He's a weekend warrior. He likes to lift. He likes to push himself. He loads up his squat, and he's still able to complete the squat. But he does it in a way that's he has to compensate a lot. So he's hitting control save on these poor movement patterns because he's loading up a dysfunctional squat. Versus, so there he's not only not offsetting an imbalance that he created by sitting, he's actually reinforcing that imbalance and layering on top of it even more imbalance. Versus, Joe goes to the gym, grabs 2 heavy-ass kettlebells because he wants to push himself, puts one in each hand, carries 80% of his body weight between both hands, and does loaded carries. Joe is rebalancing his body because he's forcing his hips to do what they're supposed to, but under load. He's forcing his shoulders and his posture to realign. So just
he works on his squat for the 1/3 of his session too, because he can work on offsetting and getting and redeveloping and reestablishing comfort in these positions that
lighter
he wants
loads
to then load
and grooves in a better pattern. You're right. So it's just like the gym can be a place that can either be good or bad, and it doesn't mean don't go to the gym. It just means reevaluate how you're doing what you're doing and also what you're doing in the gym.
Yeah, exactly.
So use the gym as a place to restore balance instead of creating imbalances or even making them deeper seated imbalances. Mm-hmm. So a return. So let's talk about natural movement. So you started off in terms of helping someone kind of get back to being fit by saying reconnect with your machine, spend some time in the natural environment. And when we go on the topic of natural movement, there's these kind of major movement categories. So we talk about like running is one of them.
Yeah.
Crawling, hanging, some sort of physical activity with a partner, I think is very beneficial, whether that's wrestling or partner stability drills. What else would you add into that basket?
I mean, get some floor work, some groundwork.
Yeah.
So being able to just be comfortable getting down, up off the floor, doing some stuff on the floor, whether it's any crawling, things like that. And you don't have to spend your whole day there because, again, people take things to extremes. But just being confident.
Yeah, I don't want to crawl all day in the gym, bro. It's like, maybe just do a couple rounds of it.
Yeah. And then, look at the jiu-jitsu guys who are, super competent on the ground, rolling, being on their backs, maneuvering. So taking aspects of other things. But I think that the handling load, you already mentioned the carrying, some sort of climbing, I think would be not quite as directly relevant, but also very something that might show up. I think one of the things you said is the running is one of the things, even incorporating some sprinting or being able to work up to the point of being able to sprint without getting into any injury issues.
Yeah.
Can be powerful. So that might actually show up more than anything else. If you mentioned you had to sprint across the road the other day because a car was coming, it's like, oh shit, I have to sprint right now. And if you can't sprint or you don't know how to sprint, that might show up in your life today. It might, or if somebody, so you might want to have to run away from something. So
you don't have to run away from predators anymore, but being able to run is still very beneficial. Maybe you have to run to catch the bus, right? Yeah. If you don't catch the bus, you're going to be an hour late for work.
Can you do that?
Are you actually capable of running to the bus without a huge consequence? When you get on the bus, you're like, oh my God, my back kills. Mm-hmm. And it's the kind of thing where maybe working on running and feeling confident in being able to run is what allows you to actually run for the bus instead of saying, oh, I missed it, I'll just catch the next one. Mm-hmm. So it's almost like this vicious cycle that can be in a negative or a positive direction. If you are losing this kind of realm of physical freedom, that circle shrinks more and more and more. And the more it shrinks, the less you do, so the more it shrinks. Yeah. Whereas on the other side, it's like, okay, I didn't really feel confident running for the bus, but I'm going to do some sprints in the field. Oh shit, I actually am pretty good at sprinting, right? It might not look perfect, but I didn't hurt, and I was able to actually get pretty fast, and I kind of enjoyed it. The next time you run for the bus, now you're confident doing that. Maybe then you're like, I want to do runs. Your circle expands. So it's, are you shrinking or expanding your physical freedom? And every single day is an opportunity to determine which one of those two you're doing.
I think that's, one of the final things I'll note is that it just, that with that freedom comes more of a chance to thrive and be healthy and enjoy things because it gives you just more options. and more confidence, and just navigating through the environment and through your life just becomes better and easier if you're fit the way we would describe it.
I think one of the last things to kind of end off on is a lot like going to the gym really is a supplement, right? Like when you go to the gym, you're trying to consume a supplement for movement, and you're supplementing for something you're lacking in your day-to-day life. Right? If you sit all day and then you go to the gym, number one, that's a recipe for injury. But number two, if you live a day-to-day life that promotes fitness, that has movement built into it, that has, that doesn't put you in one fixed position for a long period of time. If you live a life that promotes fitness, you do not have to consume as much of these fitness, quote unquote, fitness supplements, right? Like I don't spend as much time in the gym anymore, but I do spend a lot more time being physical.
Yeah.
Right. And I think people need to, the other day I came home, Liv was doing a 30-minute workout here. She was doing carries up and down the stairs. She was doing lunges. She was doing some squat work, right? Like you don't need that. I think for a lot of people, this, they have to redefine what they think of as fitness, right? Being fit means being able to survive and thrive, right? Not only not having injuries, but having an enjoyable time that you have on this planet by having a body that functions and gives you the freedom to do whatever you want. But I think, once they've redefined fitness, they're like, okay, well, now I got to go to the gym. Oh, I got to drive 20 minutes. I got to pay to get a membership. It's like, well, you don't need to, right? Like just start small and build this addiction to positive fitness by just starting with little things. Go for a sprint. I think everyone can walk out their front door and go, they can go buy a 20-pound kettlebell and go for a 10-minute walk every day with it. That is a very constructive form of fitness.
Yeah.
But people don't think of that. They think go into the gym, do a boot camp, do a circuit workout, whatever. That's not really connecting you with what it might be, but it's not mandatory.
Yeah, exactly.
So live a life that promotes fitness so you don't have to consume as many of these fitness supplements. Redefine what fitness actually means to you. Reconnect with natural movement. Use the gym as a place to correct imbalances instead of creating them. So anyway, we hope that, the goal of this podcast is for people to have a clear vision of why fitness and health seem to be these mutually exclusive things that are going against each other right now, and we have to bring them back together because really fitness and health should be one and the same, but right now they're very different.
Yeah. What you do to improve your fitness should also be something you do to improve your health because they should be very highly overlapping. That's the biggest thing.
I agree. Anyway, we hope you enjoyed that podcast. We'll catch you next week.